public engagement and science communication. And first of all, I wanted to spend some time um, telling you why, because most researchers don't really understand the importance and the the impact that their own engagement with the public and with other researchers has on their career. So if we go through the next slide. Um, Academic branding, I'm sure that you've seen online, that you've seen uh, famous people, famous academics that now know that now you know. They have worked on their own persona, their own online persona, and their persona to other by communicating with other researchers and by communicating with the public as well. So your profile as a researcher is not just something that you yourself build online, but it's also something that you build by engagement with others. So you can position your research and effectively communicate your research with a host of different people that will have an impact on how uh, your research, your career, your funding can be further moved. The next slide, please, Scott. So, to do research, most researchers will then apply for grants. We will apply for projects. We will apply for money that not only pays us, but provides us with the tools to do the research that we need to do. Government and funders need to know why it's important to give us that money, why research is an endeavor that requires attention from them. And most most government and funders are elected. They depend upon public engagement and public support. So we need to inform the broadest audience possible about what we do with the fundings that we are provided. Uh, to that end, writing a research paper is not the way to inform people. So it's the way that you present your research to other experts, but you need to know that people reading your research in papers, in peer-reviewed papers, are themselves also experts in some field. They are looking for that, and they are going to expect a certain language that most news outlets and most people don't encounter on everyday life. And the next one, please, Scott. So from project initiation, you need to think about your research in terms of what societal challenge is addressed so that you can have immediate, medium term, and long term outputs that you can present to to peers and to the broad public. So what results do you expect your project to produce? But mainly, what benefits will the project deliver? So it's not just presenting, we've done this cool bit of research and these are the findings. Then you have to explain what the findings mean. What is your interpretation of what the findings mean and what they can change long term in addressing the problem you first described. So the intended impact achieved and the achieved societal goals need to be explained, need to be addressed, need to be stated clearly when you're communicating your research. So the next one, please. And we've crafted a little roadmap for you. What we're going to talk about is first how you prepare this. So think carefully about your story. Having one clear message is best. So you then need to capture attention and map your engagement strategy and hold your audience by the hand, guide them through your journey, make it personal. A lot of researchers don't especially in the sciences, don't place themselves within the overall research journey, but it is essential when you're communicating outside that you do so. So you have to adapt your message to your audience and then follow simple rules that can make a huge difference in your communication. Thank you. So this is something that you can do throughout, and you'll need to do in different aspects throughout your research project. So during the project, you have to put as many outputs as possible online. That means that if you present a poster at a conference, you can deposit it in a data repository, in an image repository. You can submit for engagement, speaking engagements outside of conferences as well. You can build a network of people interested in your work. So I've seen that, for instance, Deprasad Dutta said, asked to engage via ResearchGate. That's an excellent way to build up a network of people interested in your work. On publication, also, you have to connect the final publication to the other related outputs. So if you've presented a poster, if you've presented a seminar, if you've have protocols, if you have other people talking about your work, connect everything to that final output so that you have as many ways of delivering a message as possible. And summarize your work in plain language. You are the expert of what you did, so you will be the best placed to write something that other people can come to learn in layman's terms about your work. So if you can explain it to your grandmother, then you're succeeding. So tell people that you have published, not just within your academic networks, but also everyone that you come across. And as a practice, you should keep the work alive by connecting it to new materials. Once it gets published, if it gets referenced in news, if it gets cited by others, keep it alive, keep talking about that, and measure which communications were most effective and do more of those. It's not just a question of doing something and figuring out which people connected with you, but if they were the people that you were expecting that to connect with you, and what were the results of that connection. So for a paper to be, whenever you published a paper, then your first output, what you're interested in, is citations. So for your career, a highly cited paper is the best that can happen. So the key considerations for having a highly cited paper and for talking about it are accessibility. So can users access content? Is it behind a paywall? Do you have to log into a different website to access it? Do you need a library subscription? Does the journal that you publish in publicize your work? Do you have preprints that you can share that have not been embargoed? Is something that you can do, outputs from your work or bits of your results? Can you talk about it in a way that's not going to interfere with the copyright of your work? And then that builds, over time, that builds academic authority. People recognize you from the work that you've done. People know that you are that person that did that study that found something interesting for them. And the next one. So this is also important. This is one of my favorite pieces of communication. A lot of time, people that are not in academia don't know what we talk about when you talk about publish or perish. And why is it important to publish papers? And why are we all running to publish papers? This is a way that, with very few words and only a couple of graphics, tells you why it's interesting and what is the overall path that academics feel they have to achieve to publish and to have a career. So parish is here is about having a successful career in academia, basically getting tenure, getting grants, getting money to continue your research. So research papers are not the only form of communicating your research, although a lot of the times you can feel like it's the ultimate form and it's the final step. They are not. And one of the best ways to do that is to have other ways to talk about your research papers. So, whenever you talk about your research in a personal way, whenever you place yourself in the story, those easy to read words are appropriate. You can try always to get your research papers in a way written in a way that are as accessible as possible. And the next one, sir. So we're going to talk about some strategies now. I hope that you have found that the why is okay. If you have any questions, please let me know. Just place them in the chat or the Q&A. But we're now going to talk about some practical strategies to engage other people in your research. Right, Scott?
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm looking forward to this part, Maria. And I think for me, the key lesson from the first part is that engagement is important. We need to embrace that. It's not enough to just, to publish a paper here and there. We have to get out there and actually engage with people and try to get the most from that publication. Is that right?
Yeah, it's you can basically squeeze out of your publication the maximum impact for yourself, for your career, and for your progression in work and in life as well.
I just have a brief question for you, Maria. Is this natural for you to engage with the public? I know many people joining us today might be more like my style. We tend to maybe lurk in the background and think that just doing the work is enough. Is this something that comes naturally to you, or is this something that you've had to learn to
No,
embrace engaging with the public?
it wasn't always. When I started, I was I had a really cool PhD supervisor that always uh, that always motivated me to submit abstracts for conferences, to speak about the research that I was doing. We were required in my PhD program to then have seminars to talk to the department about what we were doing. So from an early stage, I had to learn how to present my work to people that were not experts in my work. So, and that the level of expertise in in what I was doing from the audience decreased with time. So I started out presenting my work to my own research group, and then to the department, and then to conferences, and then to bigger conferences, and then to people that had nothing to do with what I was doing before. So yeah, so I had to adapt. I had to basically trim out what wasn't interesting for them. And that's why I'm talking about it now, because it kind of went my own professional path went a bit like this.
That's true. You tend to engage with more and more non-specialists as you kind of branch outwards. So great. I'm looking forward to this next section, and I'll turn it back to you. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. So, as I was saying, I had mentors that motivated me that to submit abstracts from my work to conferences. And this is one such example. So this is a section of an abstract that I submitted. This is a technical abstract to a conference that is huge. So it's from experimental biology. It's one of the biggest conferences in biology. And I had to talk about, although the bulk of what I submitted, the small text that I submitted, was about how I did something and the results I obtained. The beginning and the end were about why I was doing that and what were my conclusions. So, what was the impact of what I was doing? And that is what I wanted to convey to you, is that it's not just about what you did and what you found, although that is the meat of what you do day in, day out. What bookends that? So the very beginning, the why you're doing it, and what you found and what's going to change from your conclusions are the important things that people outside of your main expertise are going to look at. So this is what catches their attention. And because of this, I then was invited to give a presentation, which is cool. So for the next one, Scott. When you're invited to give a presentation, you produce figures, you produce from your paper that you published, you produce charts, graphs, whatever is relevant to convey your results. A lot of the time, those are designed with a learned audience in mind. So whenever you can, and if you want to broaden your reach, and if you want to communicate your reach, your findings to a wider audience, something like infographics are great to convey a very key result. So this is one of my favorites. It talks about the gender pay gap by EU country, and it tells you what is the medium, what is the average, and where the countries sit within that average, who is doing best and who is doing worse. So it is something that you don't have to have a lot of text. You only have a couple of numbers in at the very center, but it gives you a clear visual takeaway of the main findings of this study. Infographics can then be incorporated into other things. The next one, stop, like visual abstracts. So in this example, for instance, you talk about porcupines, which are cute. And it gets you, it tells you a lot about predation risk and fitness consequences with very little text. It could be improved, it could have even less text, but I love the way in which you get images of porcupines within a really very basic research study. It tells you the main findings, it tells you what you've been looking at through images. You don't have any charts. I'm sure that the research paper had a lot of charts and lots of tables with data, but this gives you the takeaway image, and it gives you something more, which is it grabs your attention because it has really cool and cute drawings of porcupines. So sometimes whenever you're trying to communicate this is for a very clear purpose. And the next slide, we're going to talk about the components of an effective visual abstract. So this is from the Annals of Surgery. So it's a journal that actually creates visual abstracts because it's important for them that patients, for instance, learn most of what they can from a very dry research paper. So it gives you the citation at the very bottom, so you know where to look for more information. But it summarizes the key question in the very top with a bold title, a declarative title, and then it tells you with images and with very little text what are the main findings. So it states what you were comparing, it gives you a visual display, and it tells you what increased, what decreased, what you were comparing. It gives you data with units without it being boring. So you know that, for instance, in here the shorter, the length of hospital stay was shorter. And that is very important for patients. So it tells you the main outcome at the very center of the visual abstract. Okay. So whenever you're giving presentations, you're doing something that is the main fear of most people, which is speaking in public. So you need to calm down, have a couple of breaths, and learn that to explain the value of your research is one of the ways that you're going to justify your funding is showing impact, not just in conferences, but in the broader society. Whenever I was progressing within my research, I joined an association that I don't know if you know, which is called Pint of Science, that has a festival of science communication a week a year. What they do is that they get experts in their area and they ask them to talk about their research to a crowd of people that assembles later in the evening at a pub. That is a non-threatening, engaging way that most audiences like to know about stuff. So whenever you're talking about something, you don't just present your research. Please get like Scott did with his pitch of getting Bentham for Bentham Science publications in for librarians. Add a QR code linking directly to what you want people to engage with. It's a really cool way. Everyone has a mobile phone nowadays, so you can, of course, get people to engage directly whilst you're talking to them. The next one, Scott. So the best way to talk about research is not in the dry, structured way that we have to talk about it in a research paper, is through stories. And we're going to talk to you about a couple of storytelling frameworks and a couple of structures that people are tuned in to expect. Our brains are wired for story. We know to expect a narrative when we hear a couple of structures within the discourse. So the next one, Scott. A couple of frameworks in storytelling tell you that you have to hook your audience in the first 30 seconds. We are awful at it today. Awful because we were not really we were having technical difficulties. But it did build narrative tension. We had a problem and now we fixed it. And the impact is getting to the stage that we are now.
Indeed. So as usual, we tell people, don't be like us, be better.
Be better. Be better. So it's always important to end with a clear, memorable takeaway. And I hope that we will achieve this today. So what most researchers do is that we're talking about this in the beginnings, because it's so hard and so difficult to get a paper to the finish line, to get it to completion, to get it published, you think that that's the end of your efforts. It's not. You have to continually justify your funding. To justify your funding, you have to talk to people that are not experts in your field. And this is what we have continuously been discussing and what we have continuously been learning in the and more this is true, and more governments that provide the funding and international organizations expect you to be able to translate the impact of your research. And the next one is what? So you have to move from passive discoverability, which is you're waiting for your research to be cited, to active engagement, to putting your work directly in front of the right audience. For that, you have to identify the right audience. So historically, academics view publishing as a final step, and today they know it's just the beginning. Researchers who actively promote their work see higher citation rates, increased collaboration opportunities, and greater real-world impact. And if you want to know a little bit more about what we did here, the goal problem shift is a storytelling framework. So we told you about why it's important to engage in a way that you're wired for your brain to perceive why it's important to engage. And the next. So a couple of ways to do this is to write press releases and get them out into traditional media, is to write plain language summaries, lay summaries, blogs, and to be active on social media. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those three ways next. So to use storytelling and to engage your audience outside of academia, you have to step back a little bit and figure out what makes your story intriguing, what makes the story timely, and what kinds of evidence support the angle you're exploring. So it's quite important, for instance, to place you within the research story that you're telling. I know this is not, it's not something that academics are formatted to do. We want to be as objective as possible, but that's when doing the research. When talking about it to outside of academia, you can tune your brain slightly to place yourself within the story as well. Hmm. So, for instance, here we see an example of Oxford University within, I think this is Instagram. And what the social media team for here looked for was behind the scenes of the research process, an interview with the researcher. They look for videos that show the research in action. They look for a photograph of you with your peers. They want something that's visual and that then conveys a sense of the people behind the research, because they are an institution that is trying to attract researchers, is trying to attract students. So they want you to know about the community that they're building. Um, so plain language summaries are very, very different from the example of the abstract that I presented you before. So this is not something that you will write for a conference, write and submit to present at a conference. This is not the summary of your study. This is something visually, this is something that you write. It's a very, very short text, as short as possible, really. And where you have to use active voice, where you have to aim for a maximum of 300 words, where you have to avoid jargons, and jargon here can be something that is, for instance, when you say it increased the effectiveness, a pill increased the effectiveness of treatment by, you'll need to explain what effectiveness your treatment is. And you have to start with the so what. You have to start with the significance. You have to start with what changed. And you have to know who you're aiming to read this, if they are policymakers, if they are patients, if this is just something that you want for the general public. This will increase your own output. So this will also increase downloads, citation, public engagement with your research. This will boost your profile, which will in turn give you opportunities for advancing your careers. And the next one, please. If you engage with your university or your institution, you can also write press releases that are sometimes picked up as they are by small media, but can also be a primer for traditional media to contact you for interviews and to contact you to talk about your research. And this is important because you have a responsibility to educate the public about your research. And it's really easy to continuously update what you're talking about by, for instance, having just a small sentence in your email signature that says, check out your newly published paper. And then you have a link to the paper. So, once again, a press release is not something that we are usually used to writing. And it has a pyramid format as well. You have to start with the key message. So the main point, what you learned from this, your main findings. And then you talk about the evidence that you have for that interpretation and the facts that you have. And only at the end you offer context and more information if people want to. You have a couple of aggregators for plain language summaries, and from science newses, you have publications that talk about science news. It is important that you are aware of what this works. So the types of words that you use can be picked up and can be then optimized for some people that have signed up for these news alerts to learn about a disease, to learn about something that interests them personally. When talking to the traditional media, such as magazines, associations, podcasts, and others, you don't always control the outcome. If you are being interviewed, you don't know what's going to come out at the very end. So you have to define your key message. You have to be very clear about that. Always avoid jargon and practice sound bites because those are the ones that are usually going to be taken out and quoted. You have to anticipate what questions people are going to ask you. They're not going to ask you, why, what was the method that you used and why? No, they're going to ask you, why do you think that this is important and why do you think it's going to change? Stay on message. Sometimes questions can throw you as well. So stay calm and professional and know what you want to say. We're now going to talk to you about engagement. I think that this bit was clear enough. Do you have any questions, people, that I'm looking for? Oh, we have people from a lot of places today. Scott, I can hear
Apologies, my mute was on. Yes, we do
you.
have researchers joining us from everywhere today. Thank you so much, everyone. We do have a couple of questions I've called from the chat, but we can probably take care of those just after your last few slides here, Maria. I've also got a couple of questions of my own, if you don't mind. This is really
Sure.
fascinating. So we'll call a few questions from our guests today, and we'll get into those questions in just a few minutes. So feel free to carry on and finish up section 3.
Cool. Section 3. So I want to talk to you about the most effective ways of communicating and how you can take control of your message now. So next slide, Scott. The best way to do that is that you reach researchers where they are. So that means you can write blogs, you can start a Substack newsletter, you can then have LinkedIn Live events like I have with Gareth, and you can join associations that are interested in the things that you're interested in, and that be covered in traditional news outlets. So whenever you're interested in communicating your research, you can take control of the message that you want to get across whenever you produce your own content. So the next one, Scott. that is something that, for instance, I recently read something, a career column article by a science sleuth called Lonnie Besançon. He wrote for Nature about his experience of going to a conference and talking to journalists. He then wrote about that on LinkedIn, promoting his own career. That was picked up by a blogger, a news blogger, a science blogger that has a Substack newsletter called Mixture. Within that same newsletter, she grabbed evidence for science engagement and engagement by scientists, by other peoples, such as the Blue Skies post from Jack Stilgo, that where he placed a graph from one of his papers. This is a great way that a couple of different people that have different roles in science communication and in science to talk about and get the message across of why engagement and why talking about your own research is important. But videos are now the main way, and they are the platforms of choice. So recently published in Nature was an editorial on how the future scientists will not read articles like PDFs. More and more we get AI summaries, and more we want to look at short videos of what it is that we are looking for of the research of a research question, and we engage with individual news creators. I don't know if you know them where you are, but this image right here is about the launch of a podcast called The Rest is Science. There is Vsauce and Hannah Fry, and they are science communicators that have been well established, and they've now partnered up to do a podcast about communicating science, about the research questions that interest them, and how, and they are a great example of how you can talk about it and have very low production values and still be effective to a broad audience. So if you want to go through the route of getting short videos to effectively inform viewers about a study and its significance, it's a great way to be creative. Use your imagination, be creative with format and presentation, make it simple and to the point, get one finding and talk about it. Make use of popular trends. I don't know if you remember the bucket challenge of the ALS Weiss Bucket Challenge. I still remember that. Collaborate with other academics and be educational and entertaining. These are very short, to the point formats that are not that are not to talk about the whole story of a research paper. You're talking about one thing. So you can get really professional. You can become really professional in the 60-second research video. Everyone posts videos of themselves online. You can have YouTube, you can have Instagram Reels, you can have TikTok. You can do a 60-second video to talk about your research. Just use a smartphone. You have to be intentional about your message. You have to start with a hook, give some context, and then tell people what you found and why it's important. At the very end, link to your paper, tell them to follow for more, and you will see your citations and downloads increase. So with one study, with one research paper, you now have linked conference posters, media interviews, press releases, visual abstracts, blog posts, newsletters in your interview, short videos, plain language summaries, and social media. That is a lot of buzz for something that you were expecting, that you were planning to have just one output. So that can reach different audiences and audiences you weren't expecting. There's a lot going on out there. You can have your favorite media of choice. You can look for new and uprising ones. You can figure out where the people that interest you and where your target audience is, and go out there and find them and reach them with your message. This is important, which is whenever you are on social media promoting your research, you're not targeting your friends. So it's probably best to have a professional social media account where you identify all relevant social handles of collaborators, institutions, use visuals effectively so you can get infographics or visual abstracts and repurpose them for social media. You can experiment with media formats. You can have GIFs, you can have video, you can have interactive elements. You can optimize hashtags and ensure accessibility. So if you need something, if you think that you're going to reach an audience that, for instance, has a different language than the one that you are presenting in, get captions, get alt text, and use the 555 rule. So this is important for any engagement on social media, which is every week make 5 posts, like 5 meaningful comments, and make 5 new connections. And I think that's it. The tips for brand building is basically just do it ongoing. It's not just once your work is published. You can anticipate excitement for your publication. Consider it a journey. Talk about your work frequently and develop engagement. Build a community. Build a network. And I think that's it. If you have any questions, I'll be.
Great. As always, communication seems to be the key, isn't it, Maria, as we always like to preach here in these events,
Yeah.
just making a clear communication of your findings. And I love your emphasis on the narrative as well. This is something we also share with authors in these events when we talk about manuscript writing or any aspect of science communication is telling that story. And as researchers, you're doing incredibly interesting work. You're discovering things that have never been discovered before. And so that's something thrilling you should share with people, share this journey of discovery with people and tell it like a story. It's an exciting story of discovery, isn't it?
Yes, I think that you need to um, learn about it is that the outcome of what it is that you're doing day in and day out when you're producing research. Whenever you publish a paper, whenever you have an exciting finding, this is something that needs to be communicated, that people need to know about. So you need to find the best way to engage them and to figure out what works for them and to figure out feedback from them. It's great for citizen science, for instance, if you're trying to recruit participants for a study, if you're trying to get people to help you with, for instance, a survey, it's great. It's a great way to engage.
Indeed. And with that, maybe this is a good chance to invite some questions. I've got a list jotted down here, Maria, and I think there might be a couple more questions trickling in the chat. Feel free to post your questions, anyone. Thank you for all the comments, everyone. Some nice comments for you, Maria. Thank you for your amazing presentation, says our guest, Sandra. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you so much for organizing this
Thank
program.
you.
You're very welcome. And thank you, Maria, of course, for lending your expertise today. We've got a couple of questions here. Let's see. I'll try to group a couple of them together, and some of these questions echo my own. So, one question was, how do I demonstrate the societal impact of basic or fundamental research? And then a related question that I spotted was, how can early career researchers build evidence of impact? So I think these are really good questions. So for early career researchers or pre-docs, how do we show the societal impact of very basic or fundamental research? Any thoughts there?
So, basic and fundamental research is always hard to explain to the wider audience or to the public in general. You have to start with the problem. So you have to start with what it is that you were trying to solve. It's always good whenever you're doing research on, for instance, secondary messengers in secondary messengers in signal transition pathways. Why is this important? You can talk about how cells communicate with each other. You can talk about conditions in which the cell communication is impaired. You can talk about, for instance, when you are surveying a population of porcupines, you can talk about the impact that porcupines have on the wider environmental impact, what they predate, the types, what they feed on, what is it important to maintain populations in check. Um, you can relate that to people's lives. It's always important to relate that to something that people experience in their daily lives. As an early career researcher, you can demonstrate impact by the best way is if you've been to a conference, if you've produced a poster, if you have something that you have an image of your research, and as long as it's not been published before, as long as you don't want it to be published as is in a peer-reviewed paper, because then you'll have problems with copyright, you can talk about your findings in social media. You can start to build presence in social media about your research. You can talk about why you wanted to do research. You can talk about your network and your collaborators. You can it's really easy nowadays to build a network of people that have interests that are similar to yours and start to learn what are the issues that the community faces.
That's interesting. Thank you so much, Maria, for your answer, and thanks to our guest for your question. A couple of other related questions would be, what would be a good place to start? I haven't done much research, excuse me, haven't done much outreach on my research until now. And a couple of related questions. How can I measure what I'm doing in public engagement is effective? Okay, so what maybe those are two parts of the same question. What might be a good
Yes.
place to start if you haven't really done a lot of public outreach until now? And then how do we know that what we're doing is actually working out there?
So how we know if what we're doing is actually working is to the most effective one is to ask for feedback. So ask people that have engaged with what you put out there to tell you what works and what doesn't work for them. Is the visual that you presented clear enough? Is Are you going to talk a bit more about how you did this? Do you think that asking for the people's help and to collaborate with others is a good way to do things? Whenever you're starting out, you can choose the format that works best for you. So if you're comfortable with writing, it's best that you write short formats, that you have a newsletter, that you have a blog, that you have a Substack. If you're comfortable with drawing, do that. Pedro, so the example that we placed out there of the little publish or perish cartoon, the person that does that is called Pedro, and he is a researcher. He does research in genomics. He just happens to like drawing cartoons as well. So he talks about that. If you like singing, then sing about your research. Whatever works for you, there's going to be someone that will engage with that, and then you can start to build that feedback to incorporate feedback into your next effort of outreach.
I'm looking forward to hearing a singing presentation by one of our guests someday, if not from us, perhaps not from us, Maria.
Not
I do
from
know a
us.
singing clinician. I don't know any singing researchers, but maybe one of our guests today could be the first. That's great advice too. So great advice from Maria on getting some qualitative feedback. And if you're looking for something more quantitative, you can always check alt metrics, check your downloads and check your media mentions and things like that. Those are some ways to also get some numbers on what you're doing in addition to the advice that Maria provided on getting feedback from people out there. That's great. Thank you so much, Maria, and thanks to our guests for your question. We might have time for at least a question or two more. Lots of questions about plain language summaries. I'll try to group them together. How long should a plain language summary be, and what reading level should you target when you are writing a PLS, a plain language summary? That's interesting. You mentioned also language differences as well. We're writing for a
Hmm.
global audience these days, Maria. Um, what would you suggest for, reading level when you're writing a plain language summary? How easy to read, how readable should we make that for a global audience, and how long should that be?
So, a plain language summary should never be more than 300 words. It's, if you think about posts on social media, not, the very short ones like X or something like that, but if you think about posts on social media, they're about 150 to 100 words. Having 300 words means you have to already break up into something into paragraphs, which means that people, they only the ones that are interested will read until the very end. So start with the main message because some people will not read the whole thing. Um, about reading levels, I think because we're all different here, maybe don't target people, the reading level for people that finished high school. Have a level below that so that you target people that will be interested in learning more about your research. And if you have a way of translating that into other languages, then do that. Sometimes translation helps you see if what it is that you're writing is complicated or not. If you can understand it in a language that's not your native language, then it'll probably be a good plain language summary. Ooh,
That's great
Scott is
advice.
doing
Great advice,
something.
Maria. Yes, I'm just going to post a link to Flesh Kincaid here. You can see there's a Flesh Kincaid calculator you can use to calculate the readability of a piece of text. And I'm sure you can do this with many AI tools as well now. This is one of my favorite tools for writing to a specific level of reader. It really helps a lot for drafting things like PLSs or
Hmm.
other public engagement writing. Yeah. So check that out. It's a Flesh Kincaid calculator, or you can use your favorite AI tool to target a certain
Hmm.
reading level. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Maria, for lending us your expertise today. I realize I've got a lot of work to do in terms of public engagement, and I really have to double down my efforts. And thank you so much to our audience for joining us today. As always, we really appreciate you coming back and joining us every month. If you're new to us today, thank you so much for joining us and discovering about Bentham science. And we'll be sending out links to the full recording of Maria's talk. You can review it as much as you'd like, and feel free to share Maria's talk, the video, with as many people as you like. I'm sure they might find some interesting information here as well. So if you know anyone in your lab who couldn't join this event today with Maria, feel free to share the link with them. Thank you so much again, Maria. Any final thoughts for our guests today before we go?
Um, if you're having doubts about how to do outreach, do something first. Just try it
Just start.
and then just start. And then if you want some feedback, we're here for you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again, Maria. This was really informative, and I'll take away some of your tips and try to make good use of them. And thanks again to everyone for joining us. Check your email inbox within about 24 hours. We'll send you your certificate for joining us today and a link to the full video. So So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.